A lake is a large body of water surrounded by land and not connected to an ocean or sea. But did you know that there are thousands of lakes that, for the most part, hold no water? These are known as ephemeral lakes, and despite arguably not being much of a lake most of the time, these temporary water bodies are vital to many of the world's ecosystems and cultures. This video is going to explore ephemeral lakes and wetlands, their formation, wildlife, history, cultural significance, and more. Shout out to all the comments on my endorheic lakes video. You inspired me to make this sort of a follow-up. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and helping to expand my horizons. So what are ephemeral lakes? Merriam-Webster defines ephemeral as lasting a very short time, and that's exactly what ephemeral lakes do. Also known as playas, pans, chottes, and sebkas, ephemeral water bodies flood episodically, but are dry for extended periods of time. When there's abundant rainfall and runoff, water flows and fills the basin. In dry periods, when evaporation exceeds inflow, the lake shrinks until all that's left is a dried lake bed. Some flood seasonally, others only fill a few times a century. Ephemeral lakes are mostly found in semi-arid and arid environments around the world, and are especially conspicuous in the deserts of southern and northern Africa, Australia, Argentina, Chile, and the United States. Low precipitation and high evaporation in deserts promote the infrequent formation and inevitable desiccation of these lakes. Frequently, ephemeral lakes are endorheic, meaning they lack an outflow. If there isn't enough water to permanently flood the basin, there probably isn't enough water for an outflow to the ocean. Without an outflow, dissolved minerals accumulate in ephemeral water bodies, making many of these lakes saline or hypersaline. And when the lakes dry, many leave behind thick salt crusts. There are exceptions, such as chains of ephemeral lakes and wetlands that flow into one another, but even these tend to occur within endorheic basins, since the formation of endorheic and ephemeral basins rely on similar conditions. I recommend watching this video for more information on endorheic lakes, since a lot of the information is relevant to this video. Despite their fleeting nature, ephemeral lakes are incredibly important for both people and the planet. According to the Ecology of Desert Systems, if there is one generalization that can be made about arid and semi-arid environments, it is that episodic events have a greater impact on the ecosystems and landscapes than the cumulative effects of 25 to 30 years of events within the average range. This is known as a pulse reserve paradigm. During extended periods of drought, desert organisms limit their activity physiologically or behaviorally. When rainfall comes and improves conditions, life proliferates or pulses. And the gains made during these brief favorable periods can carry organisms and ecosystems through less hospitable times. Ephemeral water bodies are a crucial part of this paradigm. Infrequent, intense rainfall events turn these dry basins into temporary oases. Lakes and wetlands form critical habitat for both endemic and migratory species, which take advantage of the influx of resources. These habitats also provide valuable ecosystem services by improving water quality, mitigating flood risk, storing carbon dioxide, and preventing soil erosion. Ephemeral basins are also a major source of dust storms. The ultra-fine soil particles swept off dried lake beds impact human health and contaminate surrounding land. When suspended in the troposphere, the lowest layer of our atmosphere, desert dust is a source of air pollution and blocks solar radiation, which impacts photosynthesis and regional heating dynamics. When it blows over the ocean, desert dust fertilizes marine environments by introducing mineral and organic materials from land. Now let's learn more about 3 noteworthy ephemeral lakes. We are traveling to the Eastern Hemisphere to explore these ecosystems in depth. Our adventure begins in the Australian outback. Occasionally, some kangaroos are spotted hopping across the seemingly barren landscape. There are no clouds overhead and few places to seek shade. The earth is red as though it too has been burned by the unrelenting heat. A rare rainstorm inundates the desert with water, and rivers begin to form from the runoff. Chattering flocks can be heard in the distance, getting louder further downstream. And then we see it. Thanda-Lake Eyre is located in South Australia, roughly 600 kilometers north of Adelaide. With an area of roughly 9,700 square kilometers, Thanda-Lake Eyre is the largest ephemeral lake in the world and the largest lake of any kind in Australia, at least when it's full, which has only happened a few times in the 160 years since recording began. I will be referring to the lake simply as Thanda for brevity, but will refer to the basin as the Lake Eyre Basin since that appears to be its official name. The Lake Eyre Basin is the fourth largest endorheic basin in the world, with an area of 1.4 million square kilometers. Thanda lies within this basin, and with its lowest point lying 15 meters below sea level, it's the lowest point in Australia. Located within Australia's arid region, Thanda receives 127 millimeters of rainfall annually, a third of the global average. But every so often, there's enough precipitation to fill Thanda, with the first recorded fill occurring in 1950, over a century after the lake was first documented. What's considered a complete fill of Thanda varies by source, but notable filling events occurred in 1950, 1974, 1984, and 2025, with partial fills happening more frequently. As of recording, Thanda is currently filling with water levels already matching 2025 levels. And it may overflow in the coming months. Monsoon conditions have led to an influx of precipitation rarely seen in the region, and since some of the rivers feeding the lake originate thousands of kilometers away, water from within the basin is still flowing towards Thanda. Water within the lake is saline, since dissolved minerals from the surrounding soil accumulate in the lake. When it's full, it's about as salty as seawater, but becomes hypersaline as it dries out and salt concentrates. Eventually, evaporation will consume the lake until all that's left is a dried lake bed and a salt crust that is 15 inches thick in some places. The hostile environment around Thanda is not entirely desolate. The surrounding floodplains, waterholes, and wetlands sustain the life that's tough enough to stake its claim in the outback. The plants and animals in the basin are adapted to the harsh, arid environment. Various halophilic or salt-loving microbes form the basis of Thanda's food chain. Dunaliella salina is one of the species of green algae found in Thanda and is responsible for its pink color. Despite the lake vanishing for periods, there are roughly 20 species of fish that live in Thanda, feeding on algae. When inundated, the lake becomes important habitat for millions of migratory birds, with some coming from as far as China and Japan. Thanda lies within the traditional territories of several Australian Aboriginal peoples, who have lived in and cared for the area for at least 40,000 years. Their way of life is governed by the natural cycles of the basin. The intimate relationship and understanding Thanda's Aboriginal peoples have with the land allowed them to survive despite the extreme environment. Historically, they lived in small groups centered around permanent water resources for most of the year. British explorer and colonial officer Edward John Eyre became the first European to see the lake in 1840, and is whom the lake is named after. When he came across the basin, Thanda was nothing more than a dry salt pan. Today, about 60,000 people live in the Lake Eyre Basin, in Aboriginal communities, large towns, small settlements, and isolated homesteads on grazing properties. Despite the lack of surface water resources, the Lake Eyre Basin lies on top of the Great Artesian Basin, which provides a steady supply of groundwater to the inhabitants through aquifers and wells. Off we go from Australia to Rajasthan in northwestern India. Here lies the Thar Desert with its rolling sand dunes and the Aravalli Hills. Within the desert is a large, shallow lake with a white shoreline that almost resembles snow. The calls of various waterfowl can be heard from some distance, and there's something pink moving across the lake's surface. Sambhar Lake is the largest inland salt lake in India. It has an area of roughly 230 square kilometers with an average depth of about 1 meter. It is located within an endorheic sedimentary basin with a catchment area of 5,600 square kilometers. Several seasonal rivers feed Sambhar Lake, with most of the inflow coming from the Mendha and the Rupangar rivers. The lake typically floods during monsoon season when there's enough rainfall and runoff. A 5.16-kilometer-long stone earthen dam divides the lake in two sections. The western portion of the lake is largely undisturbed habitat, while the eastern portion of the lake is developed for salt extraction. Accumulated salt makes Sambhar's waters hypersaline. During the dry season, when the lake evaporates, thick salt sheets are exposed on the lakebed, which are said to resemble snow. Sambhar Lake is an oasis in the Thar Desert during the wet season. It is one of the largest flamingo habitats in India, second only to the Great Rann of Kutch. Both lesser and greater flamingos migrate to the lake to feed on the cyanobacteria within. Potchards, herons, geese, coots, and other aquatic birds can also be found. On land, there's leopards, striped hyena, golden jackal, Bengal foxes, rhesus monkeys, and Hanuman langurs, which are adorable and considered sacred in Hinduism. Sambhar Lake's rich biodiversity has led to it being designated as a Ramsar site in 1990. The Ramsar Convention is an international environmental treaty recognizing wetlands of international importance. But the lake is not only important to the region's wildlife. For centuries, Sambhar Lake has been important to people both culturally and economically. Traditionally, the lake is said to be created by the goddess Shakambhari, which is a form of the deity Durga and consort to one of the three supreme Hindu gods, Shiva. Sambhar Lake is also mentioned in the Mahabharata, an ancient Sanskrit text. It's said to have once been part of the kingdom of Vrishparva, a Danava or demon king in Hindu mythology. The lake is also where the wedding of King Yayati and Devayani, the daughter of the priest Sukracharya, took place. People have been extracting salt from Lake Sambhar for at least 1,500 years. The town of Sambhar was founded by the Chauhan dynasty in 551 CE. Later, various groups, including the Scythias, Marathas, and Mughals, harvested salt from Sambhar. In 1709, the lake fell under the control of the Jaipur and Jodhpur princely states, who leased the lake to the British in 1870. Salt extraction continues to be an important industry today, though it also threatens the lake. Time to travel from South to West Asia, specifically the border between Iran and Afghanistan. This is the Sistan Basin, one of the driest and windiest regions on Earth. It's home to the 120-day wind, a strong northerly wind that causes frequent dust and sandstorms which sweep across the Iranian plateau. Mount Kajeh, a basalt mountain and holy site, abruptly juts out from the middle of a now dry lake bed. The Sistan Basin is an endorheic or closed basin that spans across Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan. The Hamoun Wetlands lie within this basin and form the single largest expanse of fresh water on the Iranian plateau. Roughly 2/3 of the wetland is located in Afghanistan, along with most of the water sources. The remaining third is in Iran. The basin consists of 3 parts. The first is the Helmand River Delta, located in the upper basin, which feeds the lakes. The second are the Hamoun Wetlands, with 3 main lakes, Hamoun-e-Puzak, Hamoun-e-Sabori, and Hamoun-e-Helmand. The third part is Gaud-e-Zareh, a hypersaline endorheic lake in the lowest part of the basin. The lakes experience seasonal fluctuations in water levels, expanding in the spring following snowmelt in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Water levels in the Hamouns rarely exceed 3 meters in depth, and varying year-to-year runoff and precipitation has caused the Hamoun lakes and wetlands to dry up completely multiple times in the 20th and 21st centuries. Hamoun-e-Puzak is the first Hamoun to fill during periods of flooding and the last to dry during droughts. Made up of a complex of shallow, permanent and seasonal freshwater lakes, lagoons, and marshes, the Hamoun was an oasis in the Sistan Basin. Dense reed beds within the wetlands provided habitat for over 20,000 birds during breeding season and wintertime, including ducks, geese, pelicans, terns, herons, and coots. The region is also home to golden jackals, red foxes, striped hyena, and wild boar. The Hamoun Wetlands and Mount Kajeh are the cradle of millennia of history. The island Mount Kajeh contains some of Iran's most important archaeological sites. A 2014 study analyzing pottery shards found that there were 3 main settlement periods of Mount Kajeh. The first was the Parthian period, which lasted from 247 BCE to 224 CE. The second was the Sassanid period from 224 to 651 CE. And the third was during the Islamic period from the 6th to 8th centuries AH. AH means after Hijri in the Islamic calendar, which, if I did my math correctly, lasted from roughly 1200 to 1400 CE. If you know better, please correct me in the comments. Located in the middle of a vast desert, these lakes, wetlands, and reed beds provided for the region's inhabitants for thousands of years. The Hamouns are so important to people and the planet that they were designated as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention in 1975. The Baloch are a nomadic and pastoral ethnic group that live in villages along the shoreline of Hamoun-e-Puzak today. The Balak use reeds from the Hamouns as forage for livestock, to construct boats known as tutans, as a fuel source for cooking and heating, and to create windbreaks protecting settlements from the intense dust storms churned up by the 120-day wind. The majority of the region's inhabitants work in agriculture, fisheries, and handicraft production. Fishing and hunting are important sources of income and sustenance. Their entire way of life depends on the water resources and ecosystem services the Hamoun Wetlands provide, or at least they did. Now the wetlands are closer to a wasteland than an oasis. To learn more about the tragic loss of the Hamoun Wetlands, subscribe to The Yellow Bird because that video is coming out on May 31st. That's all for today's video. I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you have some facts about ephemeral lakes, stories, or video ideas for the future. I hope you learned something new about these fascinating and fleeting water systems, their ecology, history, and importance to life, human and otherwise. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. It helps out a lot. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye-bye! Later, various groups, including the Sintias, Marathas, oh frick me, these are hard words, the Saushant, The Saushant is a savior fixture. The Saushant is a oh, my tongue is not working for the words. Yay, we're done! Okay. Now I gotta do this.